Let's talk about B and T cell development. Now, all blood cells are formed in the bone marrow, but B and T cells get their name because of where they finish their development. So B cells finish their development in the bone marrow, and T cells finish their development in the thymus. Now, to our knowledge, there's only one kind of B cell, but there are at least two kinds of T cells that scientists have discovered so far. One is called a TH, or helper T cell, and the other is called a TC, or cytotoxic T cell, and we'll see what both of those do later on. Now, regardless of whether we're in the bone marrow or the thymus, regardless of whether we're talking about B cells or T cells, this first part of development is true for all of them. When the cells are initially formed, they have a gene for a receptor, which is the red structure that I'm showing here. Now, what's the same with all of the receptors is this part that holds the receptor in the cell membrane. But every B and T cell has a different outer part of the receptor, which is the part that recognizes specific antigens. Now, when a B or T cell is first formed and it's making this receptor, it goes to the gene for the receptor. So this is the receptor gene down here in a piece of DNA. And part of that gene is for the constant region, the part that's the same for each of the B and T cells. And part of that gene is for the variable region, the part that's unique for each B and T cell. Now, what's interesting about B and T cell development is that in the process of making this gene, transcribing and translating this gene into an actual receptor, before they make the variable region, each B and T cell basically takes a mixer and scrambles the DNA in the variable region so that it's completely unique from every other B or T cell. Therefore, when they begin making the receptors, some receptors will recognize one shape of antigen. Another cell, the receptors will recognize a different shaped antigen. Another cell will recognize a different shaped antigen. And of course, this is thousands, hundreds of thousands of more options than what I've drawn here. But we end up with tons of B and T cells that recognize every possible shape of antigen that's out there. Once the B or T cell has gotten to this point, we call it immunocompetent. Competent, meaning capable of responding to some kind of immune challenge. And it doesn't mean that they finished their training yet, it just means that now they have the receptors, so they can do the job of B and T cells.